Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Where were you 11 years ago? There are probably some people in this room who were like 2 or 4 or something, right? 7, thank you. 11 years ago, 2014 to be exact, I can tell you that even on this day in 2014, I was in a moving truck, a yellow Penske moving truck with my brother driving from Baltimore down to Florida with all of my worldly possessions, including my car, which was being towed behind the truck. It took us 4 days to pack and to drive and to unpack with numerous stops along the way as I changed and uprooted my life from that place to this place. Now, there are 2 types of people in this world. There's the when people and the if people. The when people say things like, when I get married, when I get that job, when I retire. The if people say, if I get married or get the job, if I retire. I used to say when I get married to my old roommate in Baltimore all the time, and she would always laugh at me, saying, you're so confident that it's a when you get married, not if you get married. I wish I had that type of confidence. I long felt that way, truly, despite my 20s and even my 30s coming and going, unmarried. Now, this sermon's all over the place, by the way, so just hang in there. It'll maybe come together, right, Peggy? Maybe. Today's first reading from Genesis finds God talking to Abram 11 years after God first called Abraham to get his own Penske truck and move out of his country into this place that God was calling him. Now, Abram was married to Sarah, and God promised them offspring, children, who would bring blessing, not just to Abram and Sarah as parents, but Abraham and Sarah's children would bring blessing to every family on earth. This was 11 years that had gone by until today's episode in Genesis chapter 15. I guess no one really whispered into God's ear, hey, you might want to under-promise and over-deliver instead of the other way around. 11 years is a long time to wait. But days go by and there's no children, and Abraham's now 86 years old, if you look at the kind of biblical way that they did the dates back then and the ages. He was 75 when God first came in Genesis 12. Now Genesis 15, he's 86. Abraham has understandably become impatient. Hagar is a concubine who's now entered the picture, and she is pregnant with Abraham's son, who will be named Ishmael. Abraham laments, saying, God, you said that I would have my own kids, and that's not even true. I imagine Abraham had fear that he was wrong, fear that he would never have kids, fear that he had been such a when guy, and now he was questioning if maybe he should have been an if guy. Did I mishear God? You can just imagine Abraham wondering. I actually think that's kind of where we find ourselves as a church here at Good Shepherd. I think that we are actually, on the whole, when people. We kind of say when we do different things, when we live our mission, when we grow, or when we will grow, when we will make a significant impact on our community and region. And look, we have. We have made a significant impact on our region. We have grown. Our school is thriving. Our finances are stable. Things have gone well. Even despite a COVID pandemic and a rector transition, we're actually quite stable on our feet as a church, and we're ready for the next chapter. But here's the thing about kind of growing as a church. And I think actually growing as a person too. Sometimes when we're growing, we feel a bit like an awkward teenager. We don't have any awkward teenagers here, so you can't, ask any of them because they're not awkward, and I never was awkward either, so just for the record. But as an awkward teenager, I understand that your body is ready for adult life, but sometimes your mind is not quite there. You're bigger than you used to be, but you don't quite know how to be bigger yet. We have capabilities that you're not quite sure how to use, and I think that this goes on in life as individuals and as communities too. People look at you with big expectations, and yet inside, it's all a bit terrifying, isn't it? I actually think that's kind of where we are at Good Shepherd. We're in a Genesis 15 moment, an awkward teenage moment. We've grown beyond where we used to be, but haven't fully embraced who we're becoming completely. And sometimes I think we even wonder in those quiet moments, how are we going to stay true? How are we as a church going to stay true to who we've always been without compromising who we're becoming? When we're kind of growing and growing not just in size but in influence, and we're scared maybe that we're going to outgrow the core, the essence of who we have fallen in love with as ourselves, that DNA. So our passage kind of moves on, and this is the part that I love about this Genesis 15 passage, because God hears Abram's fear and his complaint, but he doesn't respond to Abram with a lecture about faith or a reminder about the promises that God made. Instead, God does something beautifully intimate. I can imagine this moment so vividly between God and Abram. God kind of taking Abram under his arm, maybe draping it over his shoulder, and leading him outside under the night sky. Of course, this is a vision, so it's all a bit metaphorical, but I can imagine God and Abram looking up at the stars and God saying with incredible love and tenderness, Abram, just look at those stars. Just look at them. Look at all of those stars in the night sky. I bet you can't even count how many there are up there. Abram kind of nodding like, yeah, okay. That's how many, God says. That's how many descendants you are going to have with me. That's how many I am promising you will have. God wasn't trying to prove a point. It's about the relationship between God and Abram. It's about the mentor putting his arm around someone he loves to help him see what he sees. Abram, you're looking at your circumstances. Let me show you my vision. You're counting your failures. Let me show you my faithfulness, God says. For me, I've had a couple of these kind of star moments in my own life. One of those came 5 years ago, literally today, August 10th, 2020, middle of COVID. I went to a coffee shop on a Monday afternoon at around 2 o'clock, and I met in order to meet this guy for the first time who I had started talking to online. There was Antonio Romano. Tony, he said. Call me Tony. That's what my family calls me. It was my when I get married moment was becoming a reality. It was one of my count the stars moment with God. I wonder what it is for you. When has God put God's arm around your shoulder and shown you something that you couldn't see from your limited perspective? Revealed a dream that you have, that you've always kind of held in your heart. When that will happen. And God says, yes, that will happen. The text says that Abraham responded by believing God. Not because God tricked him or showed him proof or gave him some evidence, but Abram believed God because of who God was. And that belief would go on trusting God. He trusted in God for another 15 years. Another 15 years until Abram was 99 before he had his son Isaac. 25 years in total from the first promise. Here's the revolutionary thing about this moment. Abraham's righteousness comes not from what he does, but from whom he trusts. It's not a transaction between he and God. Abraham doesn't earn points with God by believing. Abraham's faith is simply relationship. Ongoing, deep, sometimes questioning, but ultimately trusting relationship with the God who called him. His trust was in God. His trust was in who God was rather than what God did. And that changes everything. It changes everything about how we understand our relationship with God too. Because it turns out that we don't have to perform in a particular way to earn God's favor. We don't have to prove that we deserve the blessings that God is showering down upon us abundantly. Here we are, Good Shepherd Church, 11 figurative years in, along with Abraham, weathered COVID and leadership transitions and wondering if we're going to survive with these kind of big hulking denominations that are struggling all the time. But the psalmist's words ring true in this moment. Our soul, the psalmist writes, our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield, and our hearts are glad in him. Waiting and gladness. It's not an either or, it's a both and. In the waiting, there is gladness. We don't have to choose between being patient for what's still coming and celebrating what's already here. We get to do both in this Genesis 15 moment. Yes, we're between promise and fulfillment just like Abraham. But just like Abraham, we can wait with gladness, trusting that the same God who brought us this far is faithful to carry us forward into the next chapter. So I hope you'll join me in being a when person, even maybe when you don't feel it. When we embrace who we're becoming, when we step confidently into the influence that God has given us, when we trust that God's arm is around our shoulder, showing us stars and dreams that we've kind of lost focus on because of our fears. All we have to do is look up. Look up, brothers and sisters, and count the stars. And trust the one who stands with you, so that you and I might live as the when people God created us to be. Amen.